Good morning. My name is Jenn Katon. I'm a member of the Worship and Music Committee. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. It's my pleasure to welcome you to First Parish of Plymouth Congregation's virtual service. This morning, our technical director is Linda Harding. The first portion of our service is recorded and uploaded to Facebook and YouTube. Our personal sharing during Joys and Concerns is not recorded. Please join us for our virtual coffee hour after service. Whoever you are, wherever you're from, whomever you love, whatever you believe, wherever you are on your journey, come walk with us this hour. Let us walk together this hour. Our call to worship comes to us from Victoria Sanford, a child in a Unitarian Universalist Sunday school was overheard to say about his church, I don't know the name of it, but where we go, we're really interested in trees. All of us believe in trees.
Morning has broken like Good morning. I'm the Reverend Arthur Lavoie. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm delighted to be with all of you here this morning. I invite you to join in reading the words to our chalice lighting. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, to speak the truth in love, and to help one another.
My name is Deb Keller-Wood, and I'm the Director of Spiritual Enrichment. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Until astronauts went up into space, we really didn't know what Earth looked like. Now we have marbles and frisbees, globes and beach balls, photos, and even Google Earth. We know what Earth looks like. It's a special time to see our Earth in space and to realize we all live on this planet home. It has changed people's lives. What would it be like if many more people stopped fighting and became people of the earth? Our theme this month is, what does it mean to be a people of becoming? On this day, our thoughts turn to April 22nd, Earth Day. We are becoming a people of the earth. Our seventh principle is about the web of life. Our faith and many other faiths take caring for the earth and the natural world as part of being a religious person. As we take care of the earth, let's look at it as a faithful act. Let's consider ourselves becoming people of the earth.
Our reading comes from Robin Wall Keller, Kimmerer, Old Growth Children. Ms. Kimmerer, I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm getting that right. Ms. Kimmerer is a member of citizen of the Potawatomi Nation and is a State University of New York distinguished teaching professor of environmental biology and the founder and director of the Center for Native Peoples and the Environment. We were chatting like Varas on our hike with long, easy strides through rolling stands of Douglas fir. Then, at some invisible boundary, the temperature drops in a cold breath and we descend in a basin. The conversation halts. Fluted trees rise from a lawn of deep green moss, their canopies lost in the hanging mists that suffuses the trees with lazy silver twilight. Strewn with huge logs and clumps of ferns, the forest floor is a featherbed of needles dappled with sunflecks. Light streams through holes over the heads of young trees while their grandmothers loom in shadows. Great buttressed trunks, 8 feet in diameter. You want to be quiet, in instinctive deference to the cathedral hush, because nothing you could possibly say would add a thing. But it wasn't always quiet here. Girls were here laughing and chatting while their grandmas sat nearby with singing sticks, supervising. A long scar runs up a tree across the way, a dull gray arrow of a missing bark tapered off from the first branches 30 feet up. The one who took this strip would have backed away up the hill behind her with a bark ribbon grasped in her hands, pulling it tore loose. In those days, the ancient rainforest spread from Northern California to southeastern Alaska in a band between the mountains and the sea. Here is where fog drips. Here is where the moisture-laden air from the Pacific rises against the mountains to produce upward of 100 inches of rain a year, watering an ecosystem rivaled nowhere on Earth. The biggest trees in the world, trees that were born before Columbus sailed. And the trees are just the beginning. The numbers of species of mammals, birds, amphibians, sunflowers, ferns, mosses, lichen, fungi, and insects are staggering. It's hard to write without running out of superlatives, for these were among the greatest forests on Earth. Forests peopled with centuries of past lives, enormous logs and snags that foster more life than their death than before. The canopy is multi-layered sculpture of virtual complexity, from the lowest moss to on the forest floor to the wisps of lichen hanging high in the treetops. Raggedy and uneven from the gaps produced by centuries of withdrawn disease and storms. These seeming chaos bellies a tight web of interconnections between them all, stitched with filaments of fungi, silk of spiders, the silver threads of water. Alone in a world without meaning is in this forest.
Have you ever seen giant sequoias or coastal redwoods in California? It's the only place on earth you'll find either of these ancient trees. Seeing them, being among them is an unforgettable and a humbling experience, one that filled me with awe and wonder, a sense of timelessness. I don't know that there's anything in the world that can compare to these magnificent trees. It made it easy to title this sermon, "We Believe in Trees." As you might recall, I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area for 7 years. I moved out there in the summer of 1996 to attend our seminary in Berkeley, the Starr King School for the Ministry, and then served a church half-time in Northern California for a couple of years. Being an Easterner, I knew that there were redwoods out there, but I didn't know what to expect. The coastal redwoods are tall and more sleek than their sequoia cousins. They are only found along the coast in Northern California. Coastal redwoods average about 300 feet tall, and the tallest ever recorded was 379 feet tall. It's hard to imagine how tall that is, so here's a bit of perspective. I was driving back from Cordage Park on Tuesday after getting my second shot and saw the monument to the forefathers looming above the trees. When I looked it up, I saw that it is 81 feet tall. Imagine 4 of those stacked on each other, and you still wouldn't have the height of the tallest of the coastal redwoods. As I did, you might wonder why they grow just along the coast. Well, if you've ever vacationed in San Francisco in the summer, you may have experienced a lot of fog. In fact, many people, especially those who live out there, think of fog as its own season in Northern California. Summer finally comes in September and October, when the fog has finally lifted. These coastal redwoods have adapted and evolved so that they draw much of their moisture not from the soil, but from the fog that rolls in off the ocean and blankets much of the area. Their root systems are fairly shallow since they don't need as much groundwater, and their tiny leaves absorb most of the moisture that they need. It is estimated that these trees can live 12 to 1800 years. Can you imagine how old that is? Even a tree that today is 1200 years old would have to have sprouted in the year 821. Imagine the history they could share with us if we had a common language. Being in a redwood forest is majestic and awe-inspiring. It's fairly dense. It's kind of unnerving that you can't even see the tops of the trees. There's a hush in these woods. And when I have visited, I have felt transported back to a more primordial time where modern technology and ingenuity are like passing motes of dust. Giant sequoia are inland on the western slopes of the Sierra Nevada mountain range. They're not as tall as the redwoods, but at 200 to 250 feet, they still soar to the heavens. But with their massive trunks, they are the largest trees in the world. When they first created Sequoia Kings Canyon National Park north of Yosemite Valley, someone got the bright idea to cut a tunnel into one of the trees so that people could drive their cars through the tree. You might have seen this on television, or if you've been there, actually seen it. The tree, that's how hugely massive these tree trunks are. And I'm glad we've become a bit more enlightened today than in the middle of the last century or early part of the last century, and would no longer see that as a good tourist attraction. Now, they believe that the oldest known giant sequoia is 3,400 years old. That's 3,400 years. That would mean that it was alive before the time of Jesus, before the time of King David. It probably sprouted around the time of Moses, to use religious historical references. To me, it's unfathomable and tragic that we haven't saved and preserved more of these trees. Due to climate change, the wildfires that have been raging on the West Coast over these last several years are the biggest threat that these trees currently face. An interesting thing about fire is that it does play a role in the giant sequoia ecosystem. Sequoia cones remain closed and retain their seeds when they fall from the trees. A fire that burns through accumulated undergrowth causes the cone to burst and release the seeds. Because the trees have such hard and dense wood and thick bark, they have adapted to fires over the century. And they have a thick bark that protects and insulates them. When you are among the trees, you can see some of the older ones that are charred in places or that have had parts of their trunks hollowed out by a fire. They are able to grow around the burnt places. But I have to admit that every year, when I hear about these fires, I worry about the trees that have given me so much inspiration during the time that I lived there. There are several groves of giant sequoias that have been destroyed. And the Big Basin Redwood Park, south of the Bay Area near Santa Cruz, is now closed because of the extensive damage from last summer's fires, nearly destroying all the groves of trees in that park. Victoria Safford's reading, the one with the story about the boy who said that people in his church believed in trees. In that reading, she says that she and many others in our Unitarian Universalist churches have a spiritual orientation that unfolds itself, reveals itself outside and inside, and it cannot be contained within any single creed or book or building or tradition. And it cannot respond to small-minded anthropomorphic gods in beards or turbans or even suits and ties. These deities who are larger than life but smaller than soul. These smaller than soul deities don't really speak to us. But many of us can relate to the force that permeates the cosmos and gives lives in our souls and forms of life that outlive us all. When among the great forces of nature, I can feel an everlasting, abiding, life-giving energy. Sometimes something I don't often feel in a church. Just imagine what the trees could tell us about ourselves and the history of our world if they could talk, or if we listened more deeply to their world. Just imagine what insights and knowledge they could give us. Would we listen to them? Would we take their advice seriously? In our fast-paced, high-tech world, I'm not sure we would pay much attention. They are our elders, after all. And in our current American society, we don't pay too much attention to our elders in any form. As tragic as it is that ancient groves of trees are being decimated by wildfires, beetles, all the cutting, and everything that's been brought by climate change, it's also a great tragedy that so many of our human elders, especially those of color, have been claimed by this pandemic. There are enormous sources of wisdom and strength that are being wiped out because of our lack of appropriate care. These trees and elders have so much to teach us about life and resilience, dealing with untold struggles in changing times. They could show us how to deal with the fires that inevitably occur in our lives and give us hope that we too could grow around the burnt and scarred places. The trees point us toward the sacred forces of life that are strong and enduring and know something about facing challenges. In the article, Old Growth Children, that our reading was taken from, Dr. Robin Wall-Kimmerer also writes about the native peoples who inhabited that area where she is writing from in the Pacific Northwest. She writes, native peoples of the Pacific Northwest made rich livelihoods here for millennia, living with one foot in the forest and one on the shore, gathering the abundance of both. Whatever they needed, they asked for respectfully. And for whatever they received, they offered prayers and gifts in return. If a tree was cut down, every part of it was used, the wood for heating, the bark to cover their homes and canoes, the branches and leaves for baskets, tools, and fish traps. There were also certain medicines that came from parts of the tree. Where we would see a tree as a limited commodity, they would see it as a gift. The prosperity that people experienced there, from the wealth of resources of the land, the forest, and the sea, was never seen as something for individual consumption. It was meant to be shared, and this gave rise to the great potlatch tradition, in which material goods were ritually given away, a direct reflection of the generosity that nature gave to the people. Social status was elevated by generosity, not by hoarding things for themselves and accumulating wealth. On Monday, as I began putting this service together, I looked out my window at the large oak tree at the edge of the yard, overlooking Town Brook and the meadow that now leads down to it. There was a goldfinch on one branch, ablaze in yellow, and a housefinch on another, with its bursts of red. Regularly, I see a large hawk perched in that tree, keeping its eye on Town Brook below. I thought, how magnificent is that? The strong elder of the yard supporting the younger and weaker ones. These are lessons we can still learn from the trees, from nature, and from these ancient peoples. Even though we don't have groves of trees that are as stately and majestic here on the South Shore, we are blessed with many protected forested areas, as well as marshes and open space, where we can immerse ourselves in timeless worlds that point us towards something more sacred than our everyday lives. I'm going to close this morning with the words of Dr. Kimmerer. Outside the door of this cabin, the circle of young cedars look like women in green shawls, beaded with raindrops catching the light, graceful dancers in a feathery fringe that sways with their steps. They spread their branches wide, opening the circle, inviting us to be part of this dance of regeneration. Clumsy at first, from generations of sitting on the sidelines, we stumble until we find the rhythm. But we know these steps from deep memory, handed down from Sky Woman, reclaiming our responsibility as co-creators. Amen. Blessed be. Happy Earth Day. Please join in singing our closing hymn for the beauty of the earth. I apologize for a momentary technical glitch. Our order of service and our cue sheet have two different things listed as the postlude. And so I'm just checking in with Linda.
I have art. I have it all depends on how for postlude.
Okay, so that's what it should be. Great, thank you, because I'm introducing it. Sorry about that, folks. But in addition to the climate crisis that we are highlighting this morning, we know the Holocaust is another tragedy that we recognize and remember at this time of year. Specifically, April 8th, 10 days ago, was the official recognition of Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance. Sandy joined together with old friends she sang with nearly 40 years ago to record music for this year's remembrance. They are Laura, Lindsley, Erica, Suzie, Sara, and Marcella, in addition to Sandy. The text of the songs that you're about to hear for the postlude are drawn from poems written by children imprisoned at the Terezin concentration camp just north of Prague. This was the camp that was used when the Red Cross insisted on inspecting a camp. People there were treated a little bit better. As a result, the children were allowed pens, paper, and art supplies. The poetry and art survived. Most of the children did not. The song cycle, "I Never Saw Another Butterfly," was written by American cantor Charles Davidson.
Lord.